Hafare and good evening. You're watching PNC's News First. We are broadcasting live from the Broadcast Center in Akanta in Tumon Bay. I'm Clint Rigel. Topping your news tonight, the latest on the Justin Meno investigation. One of the potential suspects in his prison beating, another inmate, was apparently released from jail, even as DOC Internal Affairs investigators had received intel that he may be involved. But based on DOC records, that inmate was a federal detainee and not a local one. Janela Carrera reports.
No criminal charges have been filed as of yet, but an internal affairs investigation conducted by the Department of Corrections drops some bombshells into what may have really happened the day prisoner Justin Meno was nearly killed at the maximum security unit. One corrections officer, Benjamin Urquizu, has been fired for allegedly failing to follow protocol at DOC, which led to the brutal beating of Meno. But it's what Urquizu allegedly told another officer that could indicate who may be responsible. The report says that another officer was interviewed, and that officer claims Urquizu divulged that Meno's assault had been orchestrated by fellow inmates Jeremiah Isizaki, Jay Santos, Ermino Jack, and Mike Brown. But even after these names were repeatedly dropped in the investigation, at least one of them was released from prison a few weeks later, namely Isizaki. According to the investigation, right around the very hour that Meno was assaulted at the maximum security yard, Isizaki was seen going in and out of the yard door. Isizaki wasn't the only one outside of his cell at the time. In fact, there were multiple inmates outside, which, based on DOC policies, clearly breaches protocol since post-6 prisoners are on lockdown 23 hours a day and are only let out on a staggered basis for just 1 hour at a time. That detail about Isizaki entering and exiting the post-6 yard door was revealed on March 30th, just 1 day after Meno's assault. Then, about 2 weeks later, on April 14th, is when Urquizu's claims that Isizaki was part of the conspiracy was revealed. 6 days later, Isizaki was released. According to official records, in 2014, Isizaki was sentenced to 4 years in prison for felon in possession of a firearm. He spent time in a federal detention center in the States, but was released early for good behavior. But in 2016, while on probation, he tested positive for drug use and was sent back to DOC on November 15th of that year. He was then released about 5 months later on April 20th, or 3 weeks after Meno's assault. He had been out on probation, but was just sent back to prison last week for drug use and for failing to show up to a scheduled counseling on May 23rd. According to DOC records, Isizaki is a federal detainee, and therefore the local DOC officers have no control over his incarceration. Janela Carrera, PNC News.
Police are investigating a stabbing that was reported over the weekend behind the Harmon soccer field. Early Saturday morning, officers from the Dededo precinct were dispatched to a reported stabbing incident on a road off of the South Ugudu pipeline. GPD spokesperson Captain Kim Santos says a man was found at a wood and tin shack drenched in blood from a 3-inch stab wound to the throat. Medics treated the wound and transported him to the GUAM Regional Medical City. The victim was last known to be in stable condition. Police also reported finding empty beer cans in the area. So far, the victim remains as an unidentified Micronesian male. No arrests were made. The case remains open. More alleged victims are coming forward and sharing their stories about how they were abused within the walls of the Catholic Church. PNC's Donna De Jesus has more on the latest church abuse victim story.
Over the weekend, more child sex abuse complaints against the Archdiocese of Agana have reached 70. Attorney David Lujan is representing quite a number of the victims, including the 2 most recent. On Friday, Troy Torres, the governor's senior advisor, filed a sex abuse complaint in district court against his former music teacher at St. Anthony Catholic School, Ray Kaluag. This is the second time Kaluag has been named as a perpetrator and is also the first non-clergyman to be identified. Torres's complaint is the first to indicate that the sexual abuse was reported to the Guam Police Department, but he says Kaluag was never arrested. Court documents state that Torres was in the 8th grade and was participating in the annual procession for Santa Maria in Camalen. The complaint states Kaluag then took Torres to his home, forced him to perform oral sex on Kaluag, and then raped him. The second victim to file a complaint with the district court is a man using the initials GJ. He files his lawsuit against Father Andrew Manetta, formerly of the Mangilao Parish. GJ was part of a religious family and served as an altar boy, and court documents say he was between the ages of 8 and 10 years old when the abuse started in the mid-1980s. Manetta would invite GJ and other altar boys to sleep over at the rectory, where he would allow them to watch pornographic movies. On several occasions, documents say, Manetta would force GJ to fondle and perform oral sex on Manetta, adding that, on one occasion, he performed digital penetration on the victim. GJ, formerly a straight-A student, began to fail in school, stopped being an altar server, and gave up on his dreams of entering the priesthood. Both Torres and GJ are seeking $5 million each in damages. Reporting for PNC, I'm Donna De Jesus.
Calling him an unhappy professor, apparently bent on settling scores, the University of Guam wants Associate Professor Ron McNinch's refiled federal complaint against them dismissed. PNC's Rebecca Elmore has the story.
This is a case about an unhappy professor. That's the very first line in the University of Guam's motion to dismiss Ron McNinch's complaint against the university. The University of Guam's legal counsel is sounding off against Associate Professor Ron McNinch for refiling his complaint. In the motion, attorney Todd Thompson reduces McNinch's complaint to nothing more than a, quote, unhappy professor apparently bent on settling scores at his university, end quote. UOG argues that McNinch is simply unhappy because he was not promoted to full professor in 2012. Indeed, McNinch was not promoted at that time, but he contends in his refiling that the passover for promotion stems from harassment by university's union president, Dr. Donald Platt. UOG's scathing motion, meanwhile, says, quote, the university should not be subjected to perpetual litigation, adding that federal courts are not required to coddle plaintiffs or to endure, quote, repeated, scattershot narratives supported by little more than incendiary rhetoric and cut-and-paste attachments. Enough is enough, end quote. UOG also included their first piece of evidentiary support. Exhibit A is a letter by UOG President Robert Underwood, dated around the same time the shocking sexual assault allegations against Professor Michael Ellert started surfacing. President Underwood points out the university's zero tolerance for sexual assault, as well as McNinch's right and protection to continue to report sexual harassment. However, Underwood brings up the concerns of union president Donald Platt and Donald Rubenstein, who challenged McNinch's reports for their quote-unquote truthfulness. Although Underwood acknowledges McNinch's unquestioned protection under Title IX, he says, quote, the veracity of your statements that you have reported crimes to the criminal justice system for the past 18 years and have spoken with the victims whom the university ignored gives strong implication to readers that this has been a pervasive problem at the university for many years, end quote. But according to McNinch's complaint, that's precisely what he's contending. In his refiling, McNinch specifically names Dr. Platt for allegedly retaliating against him and even attributes his passover for promotion due to his assistance with EEOC charges at the university. PNC previously reached out to McNinch for comment, who simply said he believed the matter could be resolved collegially. At this point in time, there is no official word as to whether the contention between McNinch and the university will be resolved anytime soon. Reporting for PNC News, I'm Rebecca Elmore.
Keep watching PNC. We have more news first after this.